The hearing room smelled faintly of polished wood and old tension. Cameras clicked in idle rhythm. Lawmakers shuffled their notes, speaking in low, procedural tones that droned beneath the room's heavy silence. It was supposed to be another oversight hearing, predictable, partisan, performative. And then Jasmine Crockett stood. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. As long as this body continues to treat Donald Trump like some misunderstood patriot instead of what he truly is, a wannabe Hitler, then we've already failed the American people. The words dropped like iron on glass. Silence. A tight, cold silence that no one could breathe through. One congressman coughed reflexively, nervously as if trying to swallow what had just been said. 3 seconds passed, then 6. Then the chorus of chaos began. Chairs scraped back, phones shot up. Reporters jolted alert like they'd been shocked awake. Eyes darted across aisles. Some widened, some narrowed. Some hardened. A Republican aide muttered, "She just ended her own career." Another whispered, "She just said what we've all been thinking." C-SPAN's live feed zoomed in tight on Jasmine's face, and for a fleeting moment, the nation saw something different. Not a politician losing control, but a woman who had found it. Her expression was unshaken, her gaze unblinking. Not defiant, certain. She had meant it. On the other side of the room, Congressman Harrow leaned over to whisper into Senator Whitmore's ear, his knuckles white from gripping the armrest. "We can't let this slide." "She compared a former president to Hitler, Clay," Whitmore hissed. "That's not just slander. That's sedition." Across the aisle, Representative Owens, quiet but calculating, folded her arms. Or maybe it's finally truth with teeth. Jasmine sat back slowly in her chair, her statement now immortalized in hundreds of recording devices and echoing across every live feed. Her team exchanged glances, uncertain whether to speak or just ride the storm now breaking over their heads. No one in the room resumed the scheduled discussion. The hearing dissolved into a blur of whispers, motioning aides and reporters sprinting. For exits, outside the chamber, press vans flickered to life. The phrase began trending within minutes, "Wannabe Hitler," by sundown. The entire country was watching, and Jasmine Crockett had just declared war. The fluorescent lights buzzed above the closed-door conference room like a swarm of distant bees. Inside, tension vibrated against the marble walls, thick and choking. A handful of high-ranking Republican strategists, senators, legal counsel, and press operatives had gathered, pulled from dinners and cable interviews into an emergency session. The smell of burnt coffee and sweat clung to the air. At the head of the table sat Senator Clay Harrow, jaw clenched, eyes stormy. "She said what?" a young aide stammered. "Sir, she said verbatim, Donald Trump is a wannabe Hitler. On record during the oversight hearing, it's everywhere now." The room erupted. Senator Whitmore threw his briefing folder onto the table. "That can't go unpunished. You realize the implications if we let this narrative harden, right? The base will think we're weak." Representative Novak, always the media hawk, chimed in sharply. "Fox is demanding a response. Tucker's already blasted her on his stream. Laura's calling for a vote of censure. We don't move, now we lose the media war and the fundraising window." A moment passed. Then Harrow's voice sliced through. "The noise. We file an ethics complaint?" Silence. Calculated, cold. One of the older legal advisors adjusted his glasses. "That alone won't be enough. Not this time. We need to argue defamation, unparliamentary conduct, abuse of platform. If we build a disciplinary motion strong enough, we can trigger an internal investigation. And maybe," Whitmore added, voice low, "maybe a suspension." Murmurs spread. Heads nodded. But not everyone in the room looked convinced. Senator Graham, who had remained silent until now, spoke slowly, almost too calmly. "You all realize she wants this fight, right?" Heads turned. "She used that phrase deliberately. She baited the institution. If we go after her, it becomes a stage. She used every camera, every microphone to make it about democracy versus dictatorship, and the media will eat it alive," Whitmore scoffed. "So we do nothing?" "No," Graham said, voice tightening. "We move, but carefully. We don't attack her, we defend Trump. We shift the conversation to protecting a former President's legacy from radical smears. We make her look hysterical, reckless, unhinged. It was a strategy, familiar, dangerous. Someone opened a laptop. The footage was already playing in every corner of the internet. Jasmine Crockett, in sharp focus, with the fire of certainty in her voice and the nation as her audience. The words rolled again, unforgiving, a wannabe Hitler. The phrase wasn't going away. Not now. Not ever. Senator Harrow looked around the room. Then it begins. Tonight, we bury her with the institution she dared to call cowardly. No one said it aloud, but they all knew. This wasn't just about decorum. It was about power. The morning sun hadn't yet pierced the haze over the Capitol dome when the official documents landed on Jasmine Crockett's desk. Sealed, formal. Marked urgent. Notice of ethics complaint filed, House Oversight Committee. She didn't blink. Her fingers hovered over the envelope for a moment, then slowly broke the seal. The words inside were exactly what she expected. Censure for defamatory speech, for violating the decorum of Congress, for inciting public discord and demeaning the dignity of the office. They even threw in intentional defamation of a former U.S. president. Carefully worded legal daggers sharp enough to bleed her reputation, not kill it outright. Her chief of staff stood silently nearby, face pale. It's already on. Fox, they're calling for your removal from the committee. Jim Jordan said you crossed a moral red line. Jasmine exhaled through her nose, setting the letter aside like she was laying down a chess piece. They're scared. That's all this is. But even she could feel the weight now shifting. Outside her office window, a crowd had already begun forming splits straight down the middle. On one side, supporters holding cardboard signs that read, "She sighed, what we're all thinking, and never again means now." On the other side, furious MAGA loyalists with flags and bullhorns, shouting words like traitor, race baiter, and un-American. Reporters clogged the marble hallways like blood cells rushing to an injury. Microphones thrust toward anyone in a suit. The phrase, "Wannabe Hitler," had become the country's new obsession, trending. Debated, my feed, analyzed, feared. As Jasmine stepped into the hallway, she was met by a wave of noise, flashbulbs, shouts, the mechanical buzz of live feeds. Journalists fired rapid questions. "Congresswoman, do you regret what you said? Are you afraid of being expelled from Congress? Was this premeditated political theater?" She paused, looked squarely into the nearest camera, and said, with calm, deliberate precision, "Truth doesn't need rehearsals, and fear doesn't deserve silence." The media surged forward, desperate for more, but she turned and walked through them, shoulders straight, expression composed. Inside, however, a quieter storm raged. She knew what was coming. She would be summoned before the ethics committee. They would try to make an example of her, not just because she'd said something offensive, but because she'd said something accurate. And in the halls of power, accuracy is often the greatest offense of all. The conference room reserved for Jasmine's legal counsel wasn't just private, it was armored in silence. Its frosted glass walls guarded by 2 staffers who turned away press and even senior aides. Inside, the air pulsed with tension and fluorescent fatigue. Jasmine sat at the end of the long mahogany table, posture straight, her expression unreadable. She hadn't spoken in minutes. Across from her, Maya Devereaux entered like a storm wrapped in stillness. A tall black woman with sharp eyes and sharper diction. Maya had made her name as a civil liberties attorney who didn't flinch in front of power. She dissected it. Her reputation was legend, precise, philosophical, devastating in cross-examinations. She set her leather briefcase down and took a moment to study Jasmine before speaking. "You knew what you were doing when you said it," Maya said softly. It wasn't a question. Jasmine nodded. "I didn't say it to shock them. I said it because it's true." "Truth doesn't matter if it's unprotected," Maya replied. "They're coming for your integrity, not your opinion. They'll reframe your words as personal, emotional, incendiary. Our job is to reframe them as constitutional, historical, and necessary." Jasmine met her eyes. "Do we fight or settle?" Maya gave a thin, humorless smile. "We fight." The door opened. Charles Denford entered with his team clean-cut, tailored suit, every hair in place. Denford was the Republican legal bulldog brought in specifically for this case. Known in conservative circles for defending controversial figures with patriotic flourish and courtroom theater, Denford had one goal: turn Jasmine's words into a symbol of chaos, a warning to any politician who dared speak too plainly. They shook hands, formal, cold, then came the silence. Legal folders slid across the table. Charges were read. Conduct unbecoming. Ethical misconduct. Intentional defamation of a former president. Each phrase delivered with clinical detachment, like slicing someone without drawing blood. Denford cleared his throat, tone poised and performative. Congresswoman Crockett, we are here not because of personal grievance, but because your words threaten the public's trust in our democratic institutions. Jasmine leaned forward, slightly, voice low but unshaking. No, we're here because I threatened your illusion of civility. Maya placed a hand on her arm gently enough to say not yet. The first hearing date was set. The trial would be public, live-streamed, framed as a defense of decency in politics. But beneath that was something far more dangerous. A trial about truth itself and truth. As Maya knew too well, rarely walked into court unbloodied. The hearing room had been transformed. Cameras were rigged into the corners like surveillance in a war zone. Reporters packed the back row, badges swinging, whispering shorthand to their earpieces. Every seat in the gallery was filled: staffers, interns, former senators, podcast hosts, law students. This wasn't just oversight anymore. It was theater, but unlike theater, the stakes here were real: reputations, legacies, and the fragile boundary between protected speech and political heresy. The defense table. Maya Devereaux opened her binder. Crisp and meticulous, she didn't look at the crowd. She didn't need to. Her opponent was already watching her. Charles Denford sat across the room like a coiled wire in a navy suit, fingers laced neatly. He'd made his opening statements to the press that morning. This isn't a witch hunt. It's about honor. It's about restoring the dignity of our institution. Maya knew what that really meant. He was here to silence Jasmine without ever calling it censorship. The chairperson struck the gavel. This hearing of the House Ethics Committee is now in session. Maya rose first. Her heels echoed in the pin-drop silence. She looked directly at the committee members, scanning each of them not for support but for conscience. It was a short search. Ladies and gentlemen of this chamber, she began, voice cool and deliberate, my client, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, did not violate decorum. She exercised her constitutional right to speak, to warn, and to name a pattern we have ignored at our peril. She turned slightly, eyes cutting through the air like a scalpel. History is not always polite. Neither is truth, murmurs rippled. The chairperson called for silence. Then Denford rose. His tone was elegant, almost mournful. No one here is seeking to silence. But speech has consequences. Comparing a former president of the United States to Adolf Hitler is not only reckless, it is dangerous. It fuels division. It disrespects the memory of those who suffered under fascist regimes, and it erodes public trust in this body. He turned toward Jasmine, theatrically pained. We must draw a line between criticism and slander, between passion and poison. Jasmine didn't blink. Denford continued. This hearing isn't about silencing anyone. It's about reminding ourselves that democracy demands restraint. Maya stood again, gently but forcefully. Democracy demands courage. The two lawyers stared each other down, not with raised voices, but with carefully loaded words, every syllable another step toward a cultural precipice. Jasmine folded her hands in her lap. She wasn't afraid of this process. She was afraid they'd win, not the case, the narrative. The following morning, the courtroom lights felt harsher, the air colder. Cameras rolled with mechanical precision as Maya Devereaux stepped forward, adjusting the microphone with slow confidence. She carried no stacks of evidence, no bombshell recordings. Instead, she brought something far more volatile: context. Today, Maya said, we'll hear from Dr. Eli Rosenfeld, a Holocaust historian, educator, and public memory advocate. A hum of surprise passed through the room. Denford stiffened. Committee members leaned forward, wary. This wasn't the witness list they'd expected. Dr. Rosenfeld entered quietly. Slight, gray-haired, his demeanor was academic but not fragile. His eyes were sharp, sharpened by decades of watching societies forget the very history they promised never to repeat. After he was sworn in, Maya stood beside him like a conductor poised before a symphony. Dr. Rosenfeld, she began, have you ever seen echoes of authoritarian rhetoric in democratic societies? He nodded. Many times, always subtle at first. The erosion of language, the demonization of the press, the appeal to nostalgia over policy, the targeting of perceived outsiders. Denford objected, irrelevant to the conduct of the Congresswoman. The chairperson looked over his glasses. Overruled. Continue, Maya paced slowly. In your studies, what role does silence play in the rise of authoritarianism? Rosenfeld's answer came without hesitation. Silence is the accomplice of cruelty. It is not neutrality, it is surrender. Authoritarian regimes rarely begin with violence. They begin with civility, with people too polite to call a thing what it is. Jasmine sat unmoving, her eyes fixed on the witness. Every word he spoke echoed something she'd felt in her bones. Maya raised the question that cut through the room. Would it be historically reasonable to compare a political figure who undermines democratic norms, praises dictators and incites insurrection to past authoritarian leaders? Denford again rose. Objection, speculative, inflammatory. This time the chair hesitated. Then, let the witness answer. Rosenfeld leaned into the mic. We should be less afraid of rhetorical offense and more afraid of historical amnesia. The silence that followed was heavier than any gavel. Outside, Twitter flooded with a single quote. Civility is how democracies die. The right called it academic hysteria. The left called it prophetic. But everyone agreed on one thing. Jasmine Crockett was no longer on trial alone. History had been called to the stand, and it wasn't taking sides. It was holding a mirror. Charles Denford adjusted his tie with the calculated ease of a man preparing for not a courtroom exchange. He stepped forward slowly, hands clasped behind his back, voice smooth as marble. This is not a history lecture, he began, pacing like a seasoned performer. This is about our present and the respect we owe the office of the presidency. He stopped in front of the committee bench, letting the silence stretch. I will now introduce a rebuttal to the narrative of creeping authoritarianism. I call on myself to present what we are calling the Trump Doctrine. There were smirks in the gallery, a few raised eyebrows among the press corps, but Denford knew what he was doing. Framing the former president's most controversial policies in language of strategy, strength, and patriotism was his specialty. He'd made a career doing exactly that, making the unpalatable sound necessary. He began a presentation, clicking through visuals on a courtroom screen, border walls labeled as national identity, travel bans as strategic precaution, trade wars as economic assertiveness. Say what you will about President Trump, Denford declared, but what he offered wasn't tyranny, it was clarity. He stood firm when others wavered. He rejected globalist dilution in favor of national sovereignty. He protected the American worker. He negotiated peace through strength. And yes, he spoke in a way that some found unrefined. But so did Churchill. So did Jackson. Maya Devereaux did not move. She waited, watching his crescendo build. Denford turned, eyes locking onto Jasmine. What Congresswoman Crockett did was not critique. It was defamation, drawing an unforgivable parallel between a democratically elected leader and one of history's most murderous tyrants. He paused. A man who built hotels and jobs compared to a man who built death camps. Gasps whispered. Through the crowd, it was an ugly pivot. Intentionally so. Then Maya stood, permission to cross-examine. The judge nodded. She approached Denford without papers, just her presence. Mr. Denford, would you say President Trump admired strong leaders? Yes. Leaders like Vladimir Putin, Kim Jong-un, Rodrigo Duterte? Denford hesitated. He respected strength where he saw it. And did he ever condemn neo-Nazis during Charlottesville? I believe he did. Maya didn't let him finish. Would you like me to play the tape? The courtroom darkened. A screen lit up. You had some very bad people in that group. But you also had people that were very fine people on both sides. The clip ended. Silence reigned. Jasmine didn't speak. She didn't need to. The images, the audio, the moment, it all spoke louder than words. Denford swallowed hard. The myth of the Trump doctrine had begun to crack. Jasmine Crockett had remained quiet through the barrage through Denford's slippery justifications and Maya's methodical dismantling. But now, as the courtroom buzzed from the Charlottesville tape, the judge tilted his head toward her. Congresswoman Crockett, you may respond. She stood slowly. The weight in the room shifted. No slideshow. No notes, just her voice, her spine, and the raw truth of lived experience. I did not come here to play defense. She began, eyes sweeping across the panel of Republicans staring down at her with veiled contempt. I came here to finish what this country keeps running away from. She stepped toward the microphone. You all want to talk about tone. You want to talk about decorum. You want to scold me like I'm some kid who used the wrong word at the dinner table. But what you don't want to talk about is why the word Hitler hit so hard. A murmur stirred in the room. Maybe it wasn't because it was unfair. Maybe it was because it felt too close. Silence. Jasmine pressed on, each word sharper than the last. You praise Trump's strength. You call it clarity. But when that strength targets the weak, when that clarity tears families apart, bans entire religions, turns rallies into war cries, what do you call that? Patriotism or fascism dressed in a flag? A Republican senator tried to interject. The judge raised a hand. Let her speak. Jasmine nodded in thanks, then locked eyes with Denford. You said Trump built hotels. I've seen him build cages. The gallery reacted. A hush swept like wind through tall grass. And when I said wannabe Hitler, I meant every word. Because it wasn't about comparing crimes, it was about recognizing symptoms, the vilification of truth, the erosion of institutions, the cult of personality, the incitement of violence, the scapegoating of minorities, the hunger for unchecked power. She took one final step forward, voice soft but unwavering. If history has taught us anything, it's that silence is complicity, and I will not be complicit. The gallery burst first into gasps, then applause, then a standing ovation from the public observers. Even a few Democrats on the panel rose with them. The judge struck his gavel, but it barely registered. Because in that moment Jasmine Crockett didn't just defend herself. She set the courtroom on fire within hours of Jasmine Crockett's explosive testimony. The right-wing media machine jolted to life like a cornered animal. Fox News cut from their regular programming to a breaking chyron. Crockett unhinged. Democrat compares Trump to Hitler. Clips looped endlessly. Edited soundbites stripped of context. Her full statement never aired, just the three incendiary words, wannabe Hitler. Across digital screens and airwaves, talking heads convened in urgent formation. She crossed a line, barked Senator Clay Whitmore on Hannity. She should be censured. Hissed Representative Denford on Morning Joe. This isn't political discourse, it's a meltdown. Tweeted Matt Gaetz, raking in thousands of likes per hour. Jasmine's inbox flooded, death threats, hate mail, calls for resignation. The smear campaign had begun in earnest, branded with faux patriotism and camouflaged cruelty. But something unexpected happened. The public didn't recoil. They leaned in. Clips of Jasmine's full speech went viral, not the edits, but the truth. TikToks, Instagrams, Threads, even YouTube shorts showed her calm delivery, her moral clarity, her refusal to flinch. Black mothers reposted it with captions. This is what courage looks like. Veterans shared it with quiet fury. We didn't fight for fascism wrapped in a flag. Even some Republicans quietly, off-camera texted journalists, she's not wrong. We just can't say it. The hashtags trended faster than the spin could contain them. Hashtag truth with teeth, hashtag Jasmine was right, hashtag wannabe Hitler. Cable news tried to pivot. The GOP launched a formal resolution of censure, but the more they tried to bury her, the higher she climbed. In a CNN town hall 2 days later, Jasmine finally responded on national television. The moderator leaned in with the question everyone had been dying to ask. Congresswoman Crockett, do you regret what you said? Jasmine looked directly into the camera. I regret that we live in a country where calling out fascism is more controversial than enabling it, the audience erupted. The internet melted. And for the first time in weeks, the White House was silent because what began as a character assassination was rapidly becoming a cultural reckoning. It took Donald Trump exactly 72 hours to respond. Not with silence, not with strategy, but with rage. He stormed onto Truth Social in all caps, fingers hammering out a screed at 2:17 a.m. Jasmine Crockett is a nobody, a failed radical from a failed party. She's the real fascist. She should be investigated for treason. By morning, 5 posts followed, each more unhinged than the last. He accused Jasmine of working with deep state operatives. He called her Hitler's twin in lipstick. He ended with a grainy, photoshopped meme of Jasmine behind bars labeled enemy of the people. Table news pounced, but this time, the dynamic had shifted. NBC's Rachel Maddow broke it down. Trump's response wasn't denial, it was projection. He didn't refute the claim, he amplified it. On The View, Sunny Hostin held up the meme and said plainly, this isn't politics. This is dictatorship cosplay. Meanwhile, Jasmine stayed silent. No tweets, no press releases, no TV appearances, just one image posted to Instagram, a black and white portrait of her, standing in front of the Capitol, captioned, "History is watching." By that afternoon, her team revealed internal polling data. 0.74% of Gen Z voters agreed with her statement. 0.63% of independents found her courageous. Even 28% of moderate Republicans said Trump's response made them uncomfortable. But the real shock came from overseas. International newspapers picked up the story. The Guardian, U.S. Congresswoman breaks silence on Trump's authoritarian drift. Le Monde, Jasmine Crockett, Uni Voix de Verre dans l'ombre de Trump. Der Spiegel, Fascismus Mannen was Fascismus ist, calling fascism what? It is back in D.C. The GOP called an emergency strategy meeting. What do we do? Someone whispered. We wait, said Whitmore, defeated. She's either made herself a martyr or the next Barack Obama. Meanwhile, in a quiet hallway of the Capitol, Jasmine walked alone. Her phone buzzed. A text from a blocked number. I underestimated you. That won't happen again. She didn't reply. She just looked up at the marble ceiling and whispered, let them come. Because for the first time, it wasn't just a war of words, it was a war of narratives. And she was no longer on the defensive. She was shaping history. The next session of Congress was no ordinary affair. From the moment Representative Jasmine Crockett stepped into the chamber, the air crackled with tension. The gallery above was packed, journalists, foreign correspondents, college students in suits, civil rights elders in wheelchairs, and cameras. Everywhere, cameras. Span maxed out its live stream bandwidth. CNN switched to full-day coverage. Fox News framed it as the Crockett Circus. But nobody was laughing. The House Judiciary Committee had convened under the pretense of a general oversight session. But everyone knew the real agenda. An ambush. Chairman Whitmore gavelled in. Let's begin with opening statements. Representative Crockett, you've made grave claims against a former president. The committee expects clarity. Jasmine leaned into her mic, voice level, eyes unreadable. I'll provide clarity, but I won't provide comfort. A ripple moved through the room. She laid out her case not like a firebrand, but like a prosecutor. She cited Trump's language and speeches from 2016 to 2024. She read quotes from Mussolini and compared them line by line. She displayed a chart showing declining Democratic rankings of the U.S. under Trump's leadership, as compiled by the Economist Intelligence Unit. Each point came with sources, footnotes, receipts. Republicans shuffled. Some rolled their eyes, but none interrupted until Representative Matt Gaetz leaned forward, smugly smiling. With all due respect, Ms. Crockett, are you suggesting that half of America who supported Trump are fascists? She didn't flinch. Double quotes. No, I'm saying they were lied to by a man who flirts with fascism. There's a difference. But if the shoe fits, gasps a chuckle from the audience. Even Chairman Whitmore blinked. Representative Elise Stefanik tried another angle. This seems more like a publicity stunt than a legal argument. Jasmine replied without looking at her. Funny, I thought silence in the face of authoritarianism was your party's brand. That line trended within minutes. Your party's brand clips hit TikTok, cut to dramatic music. YouTubers were already uploading reaction videos. MSNBC analysts called it the moment the floor cracked open. But Jasmine wasn't finished. Pulled out one last card, a previously unpublished email between former Trump staffers, one line highlighted in yellow. If we get control again, we don't give it back. Ever. She set the printed email down. That, she said slowly, is not policy. That's a threat to democracy. Chairman Whitmore paused. His hands trembled slightly as he lifted his gavel. This committee is adjourned. But it wasn't because the real trial, the trial of public opinion, had only just begun. Outside the Capitol, crowds were already gathering. Some in MAGA hats. Some holding signs that read, "We stand with Crockett, never again means now." And above it all, a helicopter circled, filming history in real time. By the time Jasmine Crockett walked out of the Capitol building, she wasn't just a trending topic. She was the story across the country. Phones lit up with a single thunderous headline. Crockett calls Trump wannabe Hitler on congressional floor. Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Threads, every platform caught fire, and Jasmine's words were the match. In New York, the Times Square news crawl blazed in red. Breaking, Crockett says Trump's tactics mirror Hitler's RISE. In Los Angeles, late-night hosts rewrote their monologues mid-rehearsal. Jimmy Kimmel opened with, "Well, someone finally said it, and it wasn't a comedian." In Texas, Fox News ran back-to-back panel discussions. Tucker Carlson's fill-in host called it treasonous slander, but even he couldn't deny the clip was everywhere. The 29-second clip of Jasmine's wannabe Hitler line was uploaded by a C-SPAN intern within minutes. It hit 30 million views in under 4 hours. Influencers duetted it. Veterans stitched their reactions, some saluting, some shaking their heads. Holocaust historians were interviewed on primetime. Republicans scrambled. Trump single quotes S team issued a 6-paragraph press release calling it a disgraceful comparison from a race-baiting radical. Jasmine didn't respond. Didn't have to, because the internet responded for her. A Gen Z TikToker remixed her speech over trap beats. Wannabe Hitler, but we still vote bigger. A digital artist posted a poster of Jasmine standing between MLK and FDR with the words, "She said what needed to be said." Even former Republican strategist Steve Schmidt posted on X, "Disagree with Crockett all you want, but compare the rise of authoritarianism in the 1930s to now. The echoes are deafening." The Democratic fundraising page crashed twice from traffic. Merchandise popped up within 8 hours. T-shirts, mugs, bumper stickers. Wannabe Hitler? Not on our watch. Crockett side IT. Now what? Even civil rights. Legend Rev. Al Sharpton spoke on MSNBC. The sister spoke truth to power. Now America has to decide if it's listening. But for Jasmine, this wasn't a victory lap. It was a countdown. In her hotel room that night, she sat silently, phone buzzing beside her, watching her face dominate every channel. Her staffers were wide-eyed, some ecstatic, others nervous. She finally broke the silence. "This isn't just viral, it's volatile." Her chief of staff nodded. "You just declared war, politically." She looked out the window at the Capitol dome glowing. In the distance, "No," she whispered. "I declared truth, now they'll try to bury me for it." Because when you name the monster always roars back. By sunrise, the counterattack was in full motion. Fox and Friends opened their broadcast with fiery red banners. Crockett compares Trump to Hitler, outrage erupts. Co-host Brian Kilmeade called it a dangerous escalation by the radical left, equating political opposition with genocidal dictators. Meanwhile, Lavra Ingraham teased her primetime segment with chilling precision. Tonight, the woman who called Trump Hitler and the left's new obsession with authoritarian smears. Conservative Twitter, now rebranded X, was #Deport Crockett. began trending, ironically pushed by users too young to realize she was born in Dallas. Senator Josh Hawley released a statement. This kind of rhetoric is exactly what tears America apart. Comparing a former president to Hitler is un-American and unhinged. Marjorie Taylor Greene posted a 3-minute selfie video from her kitchen. Red-faced and ranting, Jasmine Crockett hates America. She wants division. She wants chaos. The patriots don't back down. But the backlash wasn't just noise, it was WEAPONIZED. By noon, a super PAC aligned with Trump had launched a $10 million ad blitz. In swing states, Crockett's face appeared. In black and white commercials with ominous music, she called him Hitler. She called you the enemy. Jasmine Crockett doesn't want unity. She wants a civil war. The ad ended with, "Stop the radicals, save America." Emails to Republican donors followed within hours. Subject, they just called Trump Hitler. Body, the radical left has officially lost its mind. We need to fight back. Donate $25, $50, or $250 now to show you stand with President Trump. By 3 p.m., over $9 million had poured into GOP coffers. The outrage wasn't organic. It was engineered. Jasmine's personal safety became a concern. Her office phone line crashed under the weight of voicemails, many of them threats. "We know where your office is. You don't deserve to serve this country. You'll regret those words, loudmouth." Capitol Police assigned her increased security detail. Her staff was shaken, but Jasmine remained still. "I knew this would happen," she told them. "They want me afraid. But if I flinch, every young girl watching this will think telling the truth is dangerous." But even as Republicans lashed out, something strange happened. Behind closed doors, some began to worry, a GOP strategist confided. To Politico, off the record, she may have said the quiet part out loud, but millions of Americans quietly agree with her. What if calling Trump Hitlerish doesn't backfire? What if it galvanizes? The right had launched its missiles, but Crockett had already struck a nerve deeper than they feared, and the real reckoning hadn't even started yet.